I'm at the site of a new farm that I'm starting. A lot of people thought I quit farming, and I never really quit farming. I just took an 18-month break. But with all this crazy stuff going on in the world right now, I've decided to jump back in head first, but this time it's going to be a little bit different. This farm that I'm developing here, right behind me, is a half acre I'm leasing from a friend. And this farm I'm going to be developing is very different from anything you've seen me do in the past. This farm is not really intended to be commercial, but it might end up being so because I don't see after 10 years of growing how I could not have an abundance of produce to sell. But the idea with this farm is to build something that is sustenance based, that if the shit really does hit the fan, and I hope that it doesn't, but when I'm looking at all the signs around, I can't help but think that it will be. I want to be in a position where I have an abundance of food, not only for my family, but for those close to me. And my hope is that this farm can be an example for all of you watching. I want to demonstrate to you in real time developing a farm from scratch. Right now I've got an empty slate. This was just a week ago an old apple orchard. We've pulled the trees out and we did a simple disking of this field. This is a half acre strip. It's about 65 feet wide and 350 feet long. So there's nothing been done besides that. We are going to start breaking ground. We're going to come in, till this up. We're going to be putting in some simple greenhouses, and we're going to be getting crops in the ground. And I want you guys to see how it's all done. So this is going to be a little bit of a new direction for me here at From the Field. You guys have seen me visit lots of farms in the past. I'm still going to be doing that as much as I can. And we have other content creators at From the Field here now as well. So they'll be continuing to create great content. But a big part of my mission and journey this season is to share as much as I possibly can the knowledge that I've learned on my own farm of 10 years, as well as the hundreds of farms that I've visited over the last couple years. Particularly the ones that I visited for FromTheField.tv, because those farms I've learned a ton from. So we're going to be applying as much of that here as possible. This farm is a fairly diversified operation. We have multiple soft and stone fruit trees here. It's an organic orchard. And I'm going to be doing this farm with 3 other friends. We're going to be doing this as partners. We've all come in as 4 parties as equal investors to put up the initial capital. And I'm going to be sharing everything with you guys, the entire step of the way. I'm also going to be sharing with you the plan. We'll talk a little bit more about that in this video. But I want to take you guys through this whole process. So all we have is a blank slate right now. We've got a lot of stuff to build. We've got some infrastructure to build. We're not going to be putting in a very intense post-harvest area like you've seen in my farm or in previous farms that I've visited. This farm is more about survival. It's about how do we grow the most amount of food with the least amount of inputs in the shortest period of time. And how do we get that food through the winter and look at it like a worst case scenario. Now, I hope that we won't see a worst case scenario for a while. But you know what? Make haste while the sun shines. And the sun is shining. It's still cold. But we've got a whole growing season ahead of us. And thank God for that. Thank God that we have the time now to get crops in the ground and prepare. Because I don't think we've seen the worst of this yet. We haven't seen the end of where all the money printing and government overreach might take us. And who knows? I hope I'm wrong. I really do. Because if I'm wrong, well, we're still going to learn a lot about farming. And that's the point of this new direction that I'm going in. So we've got a blank slate, half-acre sliver. The next part of this video, I'm going to explain to you guys the plan, the budget, and some of the crops that we're going to grow.
So right now I want to explain to you guys the plan for this farm. We're going to talk about what we're growing, what we're planning to do here as far as layout and just kind of the overall purpose of this farm. So this is the land we've got. This is it's a strip right here, and it's just under a half acre. It's technically exactly 0.41 of an acre. We've got from this fence line here, we've got about 65 feet by 350 feet long. And it was an old apple orchard plot that the trees are dilapidated. They'd kind of had their life spent, so they were pulled out, and then we disked the ground. That's all that's been done up at this point. The owners also have just recently put a fence in here because they do have some animals, a fence to keep out the animals from our garden. But that's kind of the land that we're dealing with. And this whole thing came from what's going on in the world right now. It's very concerning to me. And I have been looking for my own land for a number of years now, and I really, really started looking again recently. Basically prepared to make something happen, get out there and spend the season this year developing stuff. Like, we wouldn't have moved out there, but we would have been developing it, and maybe would have made the move shortly thereafter. But I don't think we have time to do that right now. I'm kind of looking at this as sort of crisis mode. I need to act now, and I don't want to take the chance. Maybe when the dust settles from all this economic fallout, we might find land for really cheap, and then maybe we'll be better off. But the plan is for my family is to stick it out where we are now, and get this land into production so that we have a lot of food that we can share. And so the plan with this farm is, like I said at the beginning, we have 4 partners that have come in, including myself. So three other people plus me. And we're going to be managing this farm together. Of course, I'm kind of taking the driver's seat because I'm the most experienced farmer out of all of them. We do have an experienced orchardist in the team. So I'll be kind of training a lot of these guys, but the idea with this farm is to make it as little work as possible. We're not trying to make an intensive farm like what you've seen me do in the past. The objective isn't to make money on this. If we can make our investment back, great, and I'll talk about those numbers coming up. But the idea here is to make a fairly low maintenance farm that grows sustenance crops for us that we can store over winter and have an abundance of food. And we're also setting a mechanism up to accept trades. So we're going to be using a sort of a LETS system. Some of you might be familiar with that. A LETS is a local exchange trading system, and I don't know if it's where the idea of cryptocurrency came from, but there are a lot of similarities there. It's a trading system. So we're going to be having people offer work in exchange for a promise of produce later, and we're going to be using a system, and I'll have more on that once it develops. But we're kind of, I don't want to say too much about it, but we're developing an interesting system that we're hoping we can share with the world when it's ready. But so it's sort of a community-based farm. Again, the point isn't profit, but if we have a lot of excess that the immediate community or that the immediate people involved can't use, then we'll sell that through some of the various channels that I've sold to in the past with Green City Acres. So here's an old satellite image of the farm, and I just want to talk a little bit about the overall layout. So we've kind of talked about the mission of the farm and the general plan, but let's just look at the layout. So we've got this strip here, and it's basically just a long rectangle. So what I've decided to do is break it into simple field blocks, 40 by 110. Now 110 is just to give buffer, and then we're going to be able to fit 10 beds in there with 12 to 18 inch walkways. So a decent amount of space, a lot more widely spaced than I have done in the past. And that's just because, like I said, this farm is meant to be as little work as possible, and we're not doing any turn and burn. A lot of these beds just might see one crop in a year, and a lot of these beds might not even get planted in the year. And I'll explain a bit more of that when we look at some of the infrastructure that we're putting in. So just because of the length of it, I've got two 40 by 110 foot blocks, and then I've got another 40 by 55 foot block. These blue chunks are caterpillar tunnels that we're going to put up. And we might not do 6. We'll see. We might only start with 1. I mean, a lot of this farm won't really be planted until mid-spring. We're doing a lot of the prep now. And the purpose of the tunnels is primarily to go into fall. That's the thinking, because we want to have food that we can eat throughout the winter in these tunnels. So things like kale, spinach, root crops like beets and carrots and stuff, and parsnips, things that we can actually keep in the ground. Again, to be passive and as simple and low infrastructure as possible. This little brown square here is we're going to build a little lean-to there, and just a simple structure. Basically something just like this, perhaps a little bit bigger, but a simple structure that we can have our lunch in, we can hang out, a place to take a bit of shelter from the weather if it rains, also just give some shade from the hot summer sun. Not really the purpose of post-harvest or anything like that, but we will have a simple staging area in it for washing produce a little bit. But again, this farm isn't really meant for production, like as far as commercial. So we're not really too concerned with that. However, when the time comes to be commercial, one of the partners in the farm lives in a neighboring orchard and has sort of a post-harvest area that we can use if we need to. So that's the basics of the land. Now let's talk about what we're growing. This is the bulk of a seed order I did, plus some things that I already had or things that I bought from other places, of crops. So looking at these crops, these are things that that Green City Acres never really grew. Very, very long season storage type crops. We've got 3 different types of squash. We've got 2 types of cabbage. We've got 3 types of potatoes that are all for kind of each season, spring, summer, and then late summer. Celery, celeriac, parsnips, carrots, shallots, onions, romaine lettuce. That'll be something that we do in the summer, a little bit of beets. We're going to do a lot of dry beans. That's the plan. Garlic in the fall. Leeks, some summer leeks and some winter leeks. So that would be also things that go in the greenhouse. Kale and spinach. So the greenhouses by sort of early summer, we'll be starting things to go into the greenhouses. So we might start some of those fall leeks in June. They'd get transplanted out in July, and then they'll have caterpillar tunnels over them come late summer or early October. And same with the spinach. During the winter, we plan to have spinach, kale, leeks, beets, carrots, celeriac, celery. We'll have a cut and come again celery in there, and those are kale. These are all the things that we would have. Maybe some romaine we could push in there a bit. It's a little bit higher elevation at this farm, so it gets a bit colder than I see downtown. But the plan will be to have a bunch of these greenhouses, or as many as we see necessary at the time, depending on how many more people in our immediate community get involved, to how much we're going to have planted out. So that has yet to be decided on. So one thing, before I talk about the budget, I just want to talk about silage tarps. So this is a part of the budget. I'm planning to buy, this is what it's going to cost. I got a quote the other day. I'm basically buying enough silage tarps that can cover the entire farm. So every square foot. Not that we'll need that right away, but I'm going to go and rototill this with a tractor tomorrow. And then I'm going to come in with my BCS walk behind tractor and shape out beds like you've seen me do hundreds of times in YouTube videos over the years. But a tractor will kind of make quicker work of it. And then as soon as those beds are shaped, we're going to put compost on. We've got about a 20-yard pile of composted manure here that we can use. We'll cover those beds with compost, and then they'll get tarped right away. And they'll basically just sit until we need them. And then that way we don't have to worry about bringing up new weeds or new weed seeds blowing in. And then it'll also kill off all the weeds that are in that soil and that compost. So that's the idea there. Now let's talk about the budget. Now, when I first was planning this, I think this is just my naturally over-ambitious. So when we first started this, sort of my overly ambitious nature is to always think big. Just old habits, and being somebody who's been involved in commercial farming for 10 years, as well as consulting and helping set up many operations around the world, I always have a tendency to think big. And one of the conclusions I've come to in the last number of years is that it's just better to spend more money up front to get the things that you need so that it's done right and that you're not wishing you would have had them mid-season. But this farming context is very different. And when I first started the plan for this, my thinking was to get a greenhouse like this. This is a quote that I received on this is 30 by 100 feet. And this thing was going to cost about $8,000 Canadian after tax. And then there would have been another probably $1,500 in shipping it here on a flat deck truck from the Lower Mainland, just outside of Vancouver. But the thing with this tunnel is that if you're not using a tunnel like this where you're going in and out of it a lot and you're actively using it, you're going in to harvest greens, you're seeding more crops, you're rotating those beds a lot, these tunnels are kind of pointless. And it was also a significant part of the budget. It was really the biggest part of the budget. Our budget was like, we basically took out 20 grand. So we had 38,000 or something like that. Maybe it was like 35. And then I just kind of realized, wow, what's the point? A lot of people are doing this right now. These sort of caterpillar tunnel farms. I believe this is an image of Fair Share Farm in Fafton, North Carolina. My friend Ray Tyler is doing this right now. My friend John Hofer at Wise Earth Farm, who is relatively close to me here in Kelowna, he's doing the same thing. It just makes a lot more sense. It's way cheaper. You can build, these are 14 feet wide by 100 feet long. You can build these you can order them from Farmer's Friend for around $1,000 US or maybe a bit less. But if you source the materials as locally as you can build them for less than $600 Canadian, or around $600 Canadian. And that's what we're going to do, because we do have a number of companies that source out all these chain link fencing materials that basically is what these are. They're made with top rail. So we're going to build them ourselves. And that's all going to be in the videos. You guys are going to see this whole process from beginning to end, and everything in between. So we're going to build these from scratch. And so basically I've budgeted about $5,000. And I hope that I'm somewhere around there. I think I should be. But we're going to build a jig, and we're actually going to make them Gothic arch bends like this in this greenhouse. The purpose of that is that we want these to stand up in winter. So we'll put the posts, each bow will be 5 feet apart. We'll have a Gothic arch. We'll have a solid purlin ridgepole down the center. And we will close the ends. There'll be a little slit in the poly to get in and out. Just simple door, like nothing fancy. Very, very simple. But the purpose of these is to get our fall crops covered going into winter. We probably won't even really need them in the spring. But we'll see. Maybe we will. So as the budget stands right now, that's the most significant part of the budget. We're budgeting $5,000 for that. We've got the silage tarps. We're this lease for this land. We're paying $3,000 for this year, but it'll be $2,000 afterwards. We did $3,000 because I wanted to compensate my landowner for his time to go and pull those trees out and disc the land for us, because he did us quite a bit of a favor. We also are gaining some fringe benefits from being on that land. We've got access to a 8 by 40 foot reefer where we can store crops through the winter, and of course we pay for that energy. The deal he's given us is we pay $10 a day when we're running it, but if we're just storing stuff over the winter and we've got a little space heater in there to keep it above freezing, then he's not charging us anything at all. So that's a pretty sweet deal. And what else have we got here? Landscape fabric we're going to put down around the perimeters and on the beds. So you guys, if you've seen my YouTube videos in the past, I've been doing this for a number of years. We won't be doing this with crops that we use the paper pot transplanter for. So things like celery, we probably won't do that for. We might do it with potatoes. We'll definitely do it with the squash because those are going to be planted every 18 inches in a 30-inch bed. So that will be fabric. Carrots we won't do it for. We might be able to do it with the dry beans, but I might do those with the paper pot transplanter. We'll probably do it with the kale too. But anything that's sort of wider space, call it a foot, or maybe 10 inches to a foot, we'll do that. Kale we'll do at 10-inch spacing, so 3 rows, 10-inch on center, so we can do fabric for that. So the plan is to use fabric as often as we can, and we might want to do it in the walkways too. And I had done that on Green City Acres a number of years ago. I stopped doing it because I turned the bed so often that the dirt always just got on the walkways, and then the walkways became a mess because the weeds would just grow through the growth on top of the landscape fabric anyways. But that won't be a problem here because we're not going to be turning these beds very often. So we might do that as well. So I budgeted in $2,000. I think that should be enough to cover us. And then we got our seed order is around $1,000. We're budgeting $2,000 for irrigation. We'll see on that one. Basically, what we're doing here, I'll go on my farm layout, is we've got a water main here. We've got pressurized water from a well. It's filtered. So all we have to do is dig a trench from there along this fence line, and it'll be a 1.5 inch or a 2-inch Schedule 40 PVC line buried about 2 feet down, and then we'll have a spigot for each block. So we'll have one spigot that comes up here, one spigot that comes up here, and then one spigot that comes up here that'll have 2 valves. One will be for the field irrigation, then another will be for washing and whatever else we need when we're here. So it's a fairly simple irrigation setup, but then we're going to put drip. This whole farm will be drip. And the reason it's going to be drip is that it's just simple. And a lot of the crops will only need one line. So all the squash beds will only need a single line of drip. It'll be with any 18-inch emitters. One of our partners has some leftover drip like that. I also have a ton of leftover drip tape from Green City Acres. So I'm hoping that we don't even spend this $2,000. We might only spend $1,000, maybe even less. We'll see. So the irrigation is quite simple there. And then I budget a little bit for fuel, so that's just to compensate. One of our members has a truck, so just for gas there. Also gas for the tiller and the tractor. I don't imagine we'll spend much more than that. Equipment rental. So whoever is going to, we got one of the neighboring farmers is going to rototill this for us. Hopefully tomorrow. We'll throw him a couple $100 for his time, and then the rest of that money will be used to rent that ditch witch tool, which is that little machine that basically digs a trench for you. That's what we're going to use here. And a little bit of budget for nursery soil. We need to get some more to start up all the starts that we're going to do. And then this was in the budget for going certified organic if we want. And we could be certified organic if we weren't using the paper pot transplanter, but I don't think I want to do that. Just to let you know, something brilliant that the owner came up with. He's an old school farmer, always thinking on his feet. One of the problems, one of the challenges if you want to be certified organic is that you have to have a 25-foot buffer from the neighboring field. And so we don't actually have that here because this guy on the neighboring farm here isn't organic. He sprays these trees, But he has a good relationship with these guys, and he only sprays from inside this row. He doesn't spray anything over this way, which is great. But so if I wanted to be certified organic, I technically couldn't be because I'm too close. I'm not within the buffer. But the owner came up with a brilliant idea. If we wanted to be, and I'm just sharing this with you because I just think it's a cool idea. I don't know if we'll actually do this because I don't want to not use the paper plot transplanter because it's going to save us so much labor. But he said what we could do is lease this row of trees from him, and then he agrees. So we pay him something, whatever that's worth to him. And he doesn't spray those trees. So maybe that's like $500 a year or something. Who knows? And he probably could still pick those apples and put them in with his other apples and they'd probably be fine. But we would do it, and then that would be considered our buffer. And then that would actually qualify us to be certified organic based on buffer requirements. So I just thought that was a genius idea. But we probably won't do that. But we might go the road of certified naturally grown because they do allow the paper pot transplanter, and that certifying body is becoming a lot more recognized, especially here in BC, at least where I am. And that might be an option for us. But we're not really worried about selling a lot of this product yet, so we don't really care. But we put it in the budget just in case. So that is the plan thus far, folks. We're going to be going in with a tractor-mounted tiller next, blasting up the field. Then I'll come in with the BCS to shape the beds. I don't really want to do it with the BCS to start because it's just way too much walking back and forth. A tractor will just make way quicker work of it. And putting in some irrigation after that. So this whole process is going to be a FromTheField.tv exclusive. If some of you want to join me there, there will be a link in the show notes. Check it out, and joining now, you're coming in at a point where I've got an entire year's worth of interviews with farmers around North America, detailed interviews, farm tours where we're looking exactly at what they're doing, sharing their knowledge and experience, as well as my own. It's unlike anything on YouTube because everything is long form. There's audio versions of every featured video. There's a ton of content in there, and it's going to be worth every penny. Just think about what people normally spend to get an education in uselessness, sometimes $100,000, and a lot of those people are out of work right now. For $20 a month, you can get a in-depth education on agriculture. So I hope some of you will value that and check it out and join us there. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next YouTube video here. If you want to see more content like I have here on YouTube, hit the like button, share the videos with your friends, and subscribe. All right, see you next time.